Bills number 90.
House Bill 230, Department of the Environment, Zero-Emission Medium and Heavy-Duty Vehicles Regulations, Clean Trucks Act of 2023.
He's on third reading and final passes. Is there any debate? The gentleman from Calvert.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just a couple more questions. I know we talked about this a lot the other day, but for the floor leader.
Sure.
Vice Chair of the committee.
Thank you. So good evening or good afternoon. I'm not sure what it is. Yeah, it's afternoon. Okay. Do we know what this particular bill deals with heavy trucks and medium and heavy trucks for zero emission, making sure that there are zero emission trucks in the state. So my question is, do we know what the grid costs are going to be upgrading the grid?
No, but that's part of the needs assessment to be done.
Okay, so who would do the needs assessment?
Let me pull out the bill.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
The Department of the Environment in coordination with other agencies.
Okay, so MDE would do the grid assessment to see if the grid is sufficient to be able to support the recharging, I guess, equipment that would need to be installed across the state for these huge trucks.
Yes.
Okay. And the money that is being transferred to the, I guess it's the manufacturer, or is it being transferred to the dealers for the credits?
You mean for the funds to help with the purchase of electric, medium, or heavy-duty trucks?
Yes.
Yeah, that funding is to be applied for by the purchaser.
Okay, so a purchaser would go to a dealer to purchase a heavy-duty or medium-sized truck that is zero emissions, and then, in theory, the dealer would provide them a rebate, but that rebate would be ultimately coming from the state of Maryland? Or
that's right, from the state.
Okay, so the taxpayers would be paying for that?
The funding comes from the CIF, or CIF, depending on how you pronounce it.
Right, so ultimately taxpayers. And I guess my other question is there anything that is in the bill that requires a study on the increase of electricity prices to the ratepayers?
Not specifically, but presumably that would be part of the needs assessment with respect to capacity. And Delegate, if you don't mind, just to clarify, when I say the CIF, I mean, so that is not funding, that is not taxpayer money per se.
Okay, and where is that money coming from?
That comes through the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative program, largely.
And who provides CIF the money?
Power companies.
Okay, and the power companies get their money from the ratepayers. So the ratepayers are paying it, which means it's a tax. So I guess my question is, and I guess you kind of in part answered it, that there's nothing in the bill that actually specifically states that we would study what the increase would be in rates for electricity, how much more it would cost the ratepayers to build all of this stuff.
Not specifically as called for by the bill, but again, presumably that would be part of the capacity study with respect to the grid. That's part of the needs assessment that MDE would do.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Just on the bill, Madam Speaker, briefly, I know we had a lot of discussion about this bill, but the bill essentially provides taxpayer dollars for individuals to purchase zero-emission medium and heavy trucks, and those trucks would be more than likely, I guess, electric trucks, and those electric trucks would then require a substantial grid increase, a grid upgrade. BG&E has indicated that the grid upgrade would cost approximately $60 billion in the state of Maryland, just for their territory. And that would be to satisfy the requirements in their territory of bills such as this. In addition to that, that $60 billion comes from somewhere, and it comes from the ratepayers. So BG&E builds the grid and upgrades the grid, and then in addition to that, they go to the PSC, and then they ask for the PSC for an increase in rates to be able to pay for this. And then I also wanted to address what we heard, I think it was on last week, I believe it was Friday, but namely that the business community supports the bill. The business community being, I presume, the dealers and then the manufacturer that's in Western Maryland. And I just looked at the tape again earlier, and the quote was made by the chairman of the committee that sometimes the business community just needs to learn to take yes for an answer. And that was the quote verbatim, because I watched it on video. And to me, that kind of quote is so inappropriate, because essentially what we're saying is that any business in Maryland, if we put a gun to their head, then they have to bow down and do what we say or else. So of course they're going to say yes. And that to me is the very definition of crony capitalism, when we have bills that I believe effectively extort the business community into providing certain preferences in technology. And that really is the main reason why I stood up, is because of the fact that we're being prescriptive in the kind of technology that we're supposed to be using in the state. And we're saying that no other technology matters. We're going to be prescriptive with respect to policy and money, and saying this is the only technology that we are going to acknowledge that is the right technology. And what I'm saying is that we all know that technology changes all the time. By definition, it keeps changing every day. And so once we get too far into this grid upgrade and the $60 billion upgrade that BG&E and Pepco are going to be required to do, and once we have unsustainable electricity prices, I mean, they already are difficult, the electricity prices in Maryland, I think people are going to look at this bill and say, isn't it funny that the federal government put funding in their bill to get additional rebates for people to buy electric vehicles, and they called that the Inflation Reduction Act, when in fact your electricity prices are going up. It's not an Inflation Reduction Act. It is an Inflation Act in and of itself. And it is prescriptive of one and only one kind of technology. And that is, buy an electric car or else. And this body has continued to go down that path with bills that propose to give the bureaucracy in Maryland all kinds of power to do things like banning electric stoves, banning gas stoves, excuse me. You can only buy an electric stove. Banning gas fireplaces, banning gas furnaces, banning gas leaf blowers, one of my personal favorites, banning oil furnaces, banning cow flatulence. I mean, these are the bills that we're seeing. And they're one after another giving the bureaucracy the power to ban these things. And to me, that is not the way a free society operates. A free society operates letting people make free choices and decide for themselves whether they want to cook with an electric stove or a gas stove, or they want to use one kind of car or one kind of truck or another. So it should come as no surprise that I'm not voting for this bill. But again and again, we see these banning bills. And banning, to me, when you ban, effectively, that's what this bill does, and I mean this sincerely, that means you're with the Luddites. You're anti-technology. You fear new technology. You fear innovation, because there's only one way to go, and that's your way or the highway. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Chairman of the committee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think it's important for me to correct the record with respect to what I said. I was not referring to my fellow business people when I said that they should take yes for an answer. I was instead referring vaguely to conservative politicians who should take yes for an answer. And I think that was very clearly understood by practically everybody who spoke to me about that after I said it. The fact of the matter is, this is a bill that does have the support of the business community. It has the support of the one electric car manufacturer in our state, and they are in Western Maryland. It has the support of the Motor Truck Association. It has the support of the dealers. And let me just talk about this a little bit as a business person myself. I had to do it again. I had to actually cut a check for $7,000 for fuel for our vehicles. We have 5 box trucks, we have 5 pickup, now we have 5 pickup trucks and 3 vans, and it's a lot of fuel cost. And I honestly would like to be able to buy 1 electric box truck just to start running the numbers to see how it performs, given the fact that the maintenance costs, which actually I had to cut a check last week for $4,000 for vehicle maintenance, not repair, maintenance. I would love to be able to buy one of these vehicles and run the numbers, see what it's like to pay 1/6 the cost per mile in fuel and to pay a fraction for maintenance. As a business person, I think that's a useful thing for my company. So, Madam Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, this is a bill that the Environment and Transportation Committee and the Economic Matters Committee have considered very carefully in balancing off all of the options. And yeah, I think when we as a committee and as a legislature go to the length of doing what the business community wanted in the language of this bill, I think all of us should be proud of that and acknowledge that this is part of the future of not just our state and the United States, but of the entire world. And with that, Madam Speaker, I would ask everyone to vote for House Bill 230.
Madam Speaker.
Vice Chair of the Economic Matters.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to clarify for everybody that this doesn't use taxpayer dollars. It doesn't use ratepayer dollars. It takes money out of the proceeds of the RGGI auction, which is essentially an auction for states that have bound together, and companies pay in on a blind bid to pollute. And if they're using an energy source that isn't clean, then that auction then yields a result. This year, Maryland, is going to benefit to the tune of $132 million, and we take that money and we reinvest it into our economy in programs such as like Empower, right, to make homes more cleaner or to incentivize electrification or cleaner sources of energy. That way we can build out a more cleaner future. And so that's the whole purpose of the RGGI funds and the RGGI fund auction. It doesn't take any money, again, from ratepayers or taxpayers. So I just want to clarify that because that is not correct.
Madam Speaker.
Gentlelady from Baltimore County.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Would the Vice Chair please rise? I had a question about your comments on RGGI.
Which Vice Chair?
Oh, sorry, this one. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Good afternoon. So where does RGGI come from? Doesn't it come from our utility rates?
No, it comes from essentially companies, like let's say there was a coal-fired plant and they wanted to pollute, right? They bid into an auction. It is a blind auction. I think it's the top 11 bids are all sealed, and then they go with whatever the 12th bid was, and then that is the rate set for the first 11 who have bid in, and that's the rate for the entire program. Ultimately, the proceeds then go back to the state.
But doesn't that coal-fired power plant that you're just speaking of have to charge higher rates to recoup that money? I mean, the money isn't magic. It comes from somewhere. So power producers that you're charging a RGGI fee to have to get that money from somewhere, and the only place they get money from is ratepayers.
No, but
Do they print money?
no, that would be incorrect. So it doesn't have a direct impact on the rate in and of itself, and this is how they've done business, and this is how it's built into their model. But no, there's no direct impact on the RGGI auction into the rate. It's not baked into your rate at all.
So how does that coal-fired power plant that you just spoke of, that needs to pay into RGGI, where do they get the money that they pay into RGGI?
Yeah, from their profits.
So but from the money they generate, which comes from ratepayers.
Yeah, I mean, they're selling it into a market. So I mean, that's your answer.
Yes, the answer is every dollar that the power generators get comes from ratepayers. And if some of the money that ratepayers pay is into a profit, then probably your retirement account is benefiting from that. But for power companies to get money, they cannot print it. They get it from the people they charge for power.
Yes. Go ahead.
Madam Speaker, I have a question for the floor leader.
Floor leader. Vice Chair of the Committee.
So last week we had a very good debate about this bill, and I remember, and it actually just came up in this debate, that this has a lot of support from the business community. And I believe the chairman of the committee mentioned that as well. The last time I checked, agriculture is the #1 industry in the state of Maryland. I know the Farm Bureau has been against this. I know the grain producers are against this. I know the chicken industry is against this. I've received a number of phone calls and emails from the farmers within my district about this bill. So was that considered at all, their concern, their testimony? And what is it that I can go back to them and say, this is what we've done to help our farmers in Maryland?
The bill does not cover off-road vehicles like farm equipment.
Awesome, thank you.
Gentleman from the Eastern Shore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And briefly on the bill, last week I talked about the element of the bill that was concerning to the extent that I wanted to offer an amendment and talk about how we're sourcing the materials. I've looked at what California is doing. So we were talking about current events, both nationally and in California advancing laws just like this. And the trucks that we're talking about cost at a start around $100,000 and can reach high six figures to buy equipment like this. The infrastructure, as you well know, is simply not there to recharge these vehicles now, nor into the immediate or frankly distant future. There is a $40,000 tax credit. We talked about tax credits last week. A $40,000 tax credit is part of the Inflation Reduction Act to help afford these things. But let me just say, the starting price of one of these trucks at $100,000, I know what that is, and I love Ford. I've got a Ford Mustang. It's one of these Ford Lightnings, and I got to tell you, when I see one of those vehicles, all the credit to Ford for doing it. But people that buy medium and heavy-duty trucks buy them not because they're toys, but because they're tools. They have a job to do. They need to work every day of the week so they can make money. Truck drivers that drive hundreds and thousands of miles a week need reliable transportation. The technology is simply not there to achieve that. And, this tool that I'm talking about is driven our economy. And while my colleague next to me talked about, the farmers, we still have trucks that go on the road every day that have to be reliable, dependable, or else we simply don't have an industry. And one of the remarks that's coming from California is the idea that that the business community doesn't support this. Now, Volvo might, because they're on the front end of this technology, and I think they've made a business decision. Whether it pays off for them or not is really secondary to the conversation. We're talking about putting in place regulations now and into the future that feel aspirational. But I can tell you, in talking with the committee chairman and the floor leader, this is an intentional bill that has an aim, and I'm not necessarily against the aim. The question is now the right time? But let me just read from this article, because I like reading from CNN and about issues like this that are current events in California. But the quote coming from the truckers in the industry is that the cost and difficulty of complying with their state regulations would be overwhelming. Quote, a lot of the California truck rules that have been adopted and enacted recently are starting to push truck drivers out of the state. Drivers don't want to work in California anymore. They're skeptical of the rapid timeline on this transition to electric trucks. Can a trucker get a charge that will take them on a highway for 2 to 3 days? And is this technology ready for prime time? So again, we talk about buying Teslas. I don't know whether I'd be in the market for a Tesla or not. Maybe it's time to trade my Mustang in and try out something new. I'm not against that. It's my money. Do what I want. But you know what? If that Tesla stops working, I don't stop working. You take my pickup truck from me that can tow 2 pallets of cement, and that stops working, all of a sudden I can't operate. The tool of the trade, if you're a workman, is your truck. The tool of the trade, if you're a truck driver, is that cab and that truck doing interstate commerce. This bill, and I'm sure I'm going to hear it, hey, look, this is forward-looking and it's got a date somewhere in the future, but please, if we're going to do things like this, we can and should do things in a realistic way. I keep saying this word aspirational because more and more legislation that I see come through here speaks to things that we want multiple years, if not decades into the future, and they don't relate to what's happening today, but I'll tell you what it does relate to: the cost of doing business today. The inability for businesses to predict the environment that they're working in when we pass bills like this, and frankly, the cost to the ratepayers we've talked about earlier, to the taxpayer. We as a state should be really careful when we pass bills like this, because this is, again, not something related to an emerging technology that frankly, if somebody has $100,000 to buy a cool new dual motor Tesla, can go do that. This is something where instead of spending $40 or $50 or $60,000 for a medium-sized truck, I'll say to you that the Ford Lightning, I think, is a six-figure vehicle. That's not a workman's vehicle. That's not a truck that you use to do a job. That's a truck to take out and show your friends that you got something that's really fast, because I think it's fast, really cool because there aren't many of these around. But you're not going to use that vehicle to do day-to-day business in the marketplace. And frankly, even if you could, would you afford it? I mean, would you pay that money to have that vehicle around? And what would happen if you had to go to Lancaster, Pennsylvania to pick up material, go to Baltimore City to pick up material, get 2 or 3 hours away from your home base and realize all of a sudden I can't charge this, I can't get this back through, and I'm just worried about a bill like this. I'm going to close by saying last week I talked about the Biden administration and the Treasury. Do not forget the principle here that the federal government is making decisions that I think are pragmatic and realistic in the world that we live in today. And they're saying to these manufacturers that you have to be able to certify the vehicles that you're selling are free from rare earth minerals that come from countries that we are choosing as a federal government not to align with. Yet, what vehicle are we making today that would actually comply with those federal regulations? The answer is, from the information I've been able to read on this, not one vehicle will be able to meet those requirements right now. And it's a great conversation and it's a great debate happening in Washington, which means let them sort it out, bring this back next year, maybe 2 years from now, and have a conversation after we as a state and a country have come to a better conclusion about what bills like this mean to the business community and our country. Thank you. I'm voting against the bill.
Vice Chair of the Committee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just to follow up about one point about the price points for medium-duty vehicles. The medium-duty pickup truck, the Ford E-Transit, starts around $52,000. I'm sorry, it's a van. It's a delivery van. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from St. Mary's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Could the floor leader please rise for a question?
Vice Chair of the Committee.
Hey, good afternoon. I picked up on something you told my colleague from the Eastern Shore when they were asking about the agricultural community opposing this bill, and you said farm equipment wasn't part of it. But I'm reading the Maryland Farm Bureau's letter who opposes this bill, and their concern isn't about tractors. Their concern is about delivering their products. In the letter, it says agriculture affected as farmers need to move their crops, livestock, poultries, and agricultural products from the farm to the processing facilities. Now, is their concern valid that with this bill it's going to raise food cost?
No, I don't believe so. I mean, from Maryland Department of the Environment, off-road vehicles like farm equipment are not covered, even if they go onto the road, if they go into the highway.
The trucks that are used to transport livestock, poultry, agricultural products, crops, that is in this bill, and that is a requirement, correct?
If they would typically consider it to be a medium or heavy-duty truck, then yes.
I mean, how else would you get a trailer full of cows to the slaughter plant?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
How else would you get a trailer full of cows to the slaughter plant?
Will the floor leader yield for a response?
Madam Speaker.
Do you have a response?
Not yet. Still checking.
Okay. The sponsor?
to the sponsor, if I could yield to the sponsor.
You? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Nobody's mandated to buy these trucks. Full stop. If a farmer wants to continue to use their diesel truck, they may.
But you're eliminating them, correct?
No. Not at all.
Okay. This year. When is the bill going into a complete
Ever.
effect?
They never get to 100%.
Well,
This
it's-
is an incentive for manufacturers to manufacture clean trucks. Nothing in this bill says that gas or diesel engines cannot be produced. Nothing in this bill says anybody has to buy a clean truck.
Does it tie to the California air pollution restrictions?
Yes.
So
But
if
again-
California says we're going to ban trucks, this would ban trucks automatically?
No.
Is that what it would do?
No, that's not what California laws does. Ours is identical to California, and all it does is set up an incentive.
Gotcha. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from the Eastern Shore.
And I'm sorry for this, but I just wanted to respond in kind. You know, in E-Transit, and again, I'm an owner of Ford vehicles, so just please understand, an E-Transit van is as much a toy as the F-150 Lightning. It is a quarter-ton van that could be used to deliver cakes, I guess, deliver some papers. But I'll tell you what you don't do. You don't buy a Ford Transit van in a 3-quarter or 1-ton variety to do the job and have that also have this electric battery. The colleague in St. Mary's was talking about something, and I think it's worth noting. The articles that are being written right now that relate to California do relate to what's happening here in Maryland. It does relate, because in that state by 2030, they are mandating heavy percentages of vehicles that are sold in that state be electric. And this bill does, I think, the same thing, but at the end of the day, what happens if you don't meet this mandate as a manufacturer? People like me, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to Pennsylvania because I can't find these vehicles for sale in Maryland because the legislature is mandating it. So frankly, how does this help anyone? Because all I have to do is find another state that doesn't have a silly mandate like this and go do business, bring it back into my state, title it, and go back and do work. So, Madam Speaker, just a bad bill.
Madam Speaker,
Chairman of the committee.
the opponents are doing a good job of opposing a bill that is not on this floor right now. So let's talk about transit vans. My company has a transit van. We use it in our operations to clean up hazardous waste and to transport toxic waste. It's not our main vehicle. That's what we use our box trucks for. So what good is this bill? I'll tell you what good this bill is. It will create an incentive so that my company will be able to afford to buy an E-Transit van or a pickup truck or a box truck, and then I can run that vehicle for 3-4 years and run the numbers. You know, it's an interesting thing. My wife has 77,000 miles on her electric vehicle, and this year she spent her first $200 of maintenance. I want you to think about that for a moment. As a business person, I like the idea of having a pickup truck or a van or a box truck that has substantially lower maintenance costs. I also like the idea of having a vehicle for which the per mile fuel cost is 1/6 to 1/10 that of what diesel fuel is right now. I don't like cutting those checks for $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 every month for diesel, and I would love to run an experiment in real time to see whether these vehicles will save money and increase profits for my company. Yet another reason to vote for this bill.
Madam Speaker,
Yes.
just a point of clarification for the body. We are discussing medium-duty trucks and heavy-duty trucks. All of the vehicles that were just described by multiple people are light-duty vehicles, okay? Medium-duty trucks, Google search, referred as class 6 through 7, which have a GVW of 19,501 pounds to 33,000 pounds. These are the U-Haul trucks. These are the large box trucks that you see that you may go rent or are used for commercial purposes only. I appreciate the debate, but we're not talking about apples. We're talking about oranges, and let's try to stay on the bill. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
Gentlelady from Harvard.
Thank you. I'm just looking at the bill, and while I think that's the definition online, the actual bill defines a medium-duty vehicle as 8,500 pounds, so it's maybe out of line, and the heavy-duty it says is 14,000 pounds. So on my farm, the truck that I use would absolutely qualify. The one that I use to move my livestock around would definitely qualify under this bill. My truck, I think, is about 11,000 pounds, so it would be in this medium-duty vehicle category. So I just want to make sure that for those of you who are concerned about the impact on farming, you know, in the long haul, as we tweak this and as California changes their rules and we copy them, it definitely will include farming equipment for sure. Even though it's not a tractor, it is what I use on my farm, and so it would have an impact on farms.
Madam Speaker,
Yes, gentleman from Montgomery.
I respectfully move the previous question.
Question before the House is the previous question. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Oppose? Ayes have it. HB 230 is on third reading and final passage. Clerk will call the roll.
Madam Speaker.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone care to change their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. There being 98 votes in the affirmative, House Bill 230, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk